11.0.7, gearing and the new super ring. So there are things coming in 11.0. It's one of, it's one of those patches. Are you excited about it? Are you ready for it? It's just an in-between patch. At the end of the day, it's some more content for us to do. Really, it's just a gap filler until 11.1 drops and we get to go freaking do all the fun goblin shit that we're going to be doing in that one. But for now, 11.0.7 is just around the corner. And we're going to have new ways to gear and a new epic super ring that we'll be using. Let's check out all the information here that Marcellian has for us at 11.0.7 gearing.
Hey, welcome back. And I need to ask you a very important question. Are you excited for the 11.0.7 patch? I might disappoint you, so...
He's saying the same thing I have. No one's really excited. I mean, it's all right. We'll play it. It is what it is.
Ooh, the main idea of the patch is another mini zone we can grind dailies in and do rares and activities, all to facilitate the new ring, which will boost our power. How high, you ask? Well, okay. I do have to say that I'm about to shit on the content hard, and I want to preface a couple of things beforehand.
That's okay.
First, from everything we know about the Siren Isle, and especially the new ring, it is supposed to be a big power upgrade for players to farm, and supposedly it is going to carry us through the expansion. Now, this last part is very relative, and I still have my doubts about it, but I went into the PTR and tested the content with that premise in mind. Second, this isn't a diss on the devs. However,
here's the thing though, if the ring is not best in slot, like you remember when we first did in Dragonflight, what was the item we got? The necklace? The hell was that thing, or was it a ring as well? I don't remember. It was something that we put our sockets in. We got the special gems and shit. We put them in it. It wasn't best in slot for some people. So you know what Blizzard did? They turned around and buffed it. So that way it could be best in slot. So no matter what, whether or not this is at the start for you, it's going to be. So prepare yourselves to have one of your ring slots filled for the rest of the expansion. Yeah, the Onyx Annulet. Yeah, that's what it was. Too long ago, I already forgot.
The zone is actually cool, and for 1107 content, it's fine. It's new stuff to do. With that being said, thirdly, I am judging this a bit more harshly because we had the exact same content in Dragonflight patch 1007 that brought a new mini zone with mini activities, quests and rares that all had a purpose to fuel this new power ring, which was supposed to be giga good for everyone. And it wasn't.
It wasn't,
and it was relatively boring. Because that was already done and tested, I have higher expectations about Cersei's circlet ring. That out of the way, there are two main things in terms of gearing that are coming in 1107, so let's start with the super ring. Terrible. At least as a first impression. The caveat being that things...
I'm not a fan of these things. I'm not. I'll be honest. I don't like the single, the patch of gear where you get something epic to put in one of your slots. Because when everyone is epic, guess what? Nobody's epic. And the thing about that is then all of a sudden you've created this like barrier requirement that everyone has to go grind and get this thing. Why? Because everyone's going to have it. And anyone who doesn't have it is a step behind. I personally prefer, like, yes, there can be epic items in the game, but just make it something cool that drops. It's not required. It doesn't carry over too long. To me, that's what makes an item epic. But like I said, when everyone has it, it's not that special. It's just some stupid grind now that you have to do.
Will change, or the patch will flop. Or maybe stuff was bugged for me and wasn't that impressive. But let me tell you what this ring is exactly and why it sucks. For now. You acquire the ring naturally progressing through the mini story here, and it just has stamina and 3 sockets. Because this was PTR, there was a vendor there that sold the gems for the sockets and an item to raise their eye level of the ring, which normally you acquire by just doing the daily and weekly content of the Siren Isle zone. The PTR only had it until 639 item level, and its stamina was the same as a regular ring. Not sure what this means to you, but when you are telling me the ring is supposed to be an auto lock-in, insta-bis ring for an entire patch, let alone the rest of the expansion, I am either looking at a higher item level, which I believe is the more boring way to approach it, or a bigger chunk of stats. But it is not about the stats, guys. It is about the gems. So let's see what gems we have. Without going into all the details.
This is the part of it that's going to get buffed for sure. If the stats are like he's saying, they're not overly powerful, they're just going to buff the gems. That's what's going to happen. And the thing about gems, like that Blizzard keeps doing this, and it's something that I don't really care for either. All right, you got 3 gems. Guess which 3 gems you're going to use? The 3 that the fucking internet tells you to use. That's right, the 3 best in slot. Who the hell is going to put any... Blizzard always talks about, oh, player choice. It's no player choice. You're just going to go look at what the three best are and then go get them or go farm for them or whatever. So to me, it's like all just like this silly little process that everyone's going to have to do to get the same ring with the same shit for their same classes, and that's it. It's a keep you busy thing until the next patch, and it's blatantly obvious that that's what it is, and that's why I always like, yeah, that's fine. I'll go do it, I guess.
The Dragonflight version had the gems that proc the damage, zaps, dots, heals, and other trinkets like effects for the Onyx Amulet that just synergize well with each other. These new gems do the same fucking thing. Hold up. I know people memed it as a copy pasta from the same ring. Surely we don't just have the exact same
No
style
way,
of gems.
is it?
First off, let's look at the old gems for the Onyx Amulet. The ring we had in Dragonflight. Here we have a total of 24 gems split in between 7 types, while the Cersei Circle has a total of 12 gems split between 3 types. Okay, it's not the end of the world here. These 3 types of gems are essentially the colors you need to fit in your ring.
Right.
There is Thunder
Okay.
for yellow, Sea for blue, and Wind for pink? Okay.
Okay.
What types of effects can you expect from these gems? Well, let's look at the most basic ones first, because each color will give you secondary stats. From Thunder, we have the Stormbringer's
Here's the thing,
Rune
too.
Citron that gives
Secondary stat epic items are not legendary. They're not. Do you guys remember what Legion legendaries did? They had their own problems because of drop rates and had people had to get the best in slot. But do you remember what Legion legendaries did? When you got a Legion legendary, guess what happened? Your rotation changed. Something about your rotation suddenly changed. The way you played the game suddenly changed. That's what a legendary should do. This is not a legendary. It's like, oh, you got a ring. It's a legendary. You got extra stamina. The fuck? Well, how is that legendary? There's nothing legendary about that. To me, what a legendary should be, and probably one of the better iterations of legendaries, was in Legion. Now, the horrible thing about that was, people needed their best in slot or they weren't getting invited to shit. I understood that, and eventually they made it available to everybody. You just go buy the best in slot one. But like, I still remember there was that Dragon Head legendary for fire mages that I got. And once I got it, my Dragon's Breath became a like staple of my rotation, whereas before it was like a side thing that I used to disorient some guys if they were chasing me. But once I got the legendary, all of a sudden my Dragon's Breath became this overpowered thing that I was constantly using in Mythic Plus. It was badass. It was fun, and that felt legendary. That's what a legendary should be, not just a stat stick, which is what this is.
you 568 of every secondary stat at max item level. The CE section gives you Fathom Dweller's Rune Citron, which gives you 1635 mastery and boosts the effect of all the other gems by your level of mastery, which it currently does not. And
I know,
last, the
Acid.
Wind slot can get you
I was too
the
lazy to
Wind
change it
Singer
so far.
Rune Citron, giving you 2272 of your highest secondary stat. So that's
to destroy.
El Buroco, thank you for the follow. Welcome to our Scourge. Yes, it's 10% off your Smack and Sunflower Seeds. I'm going to change the little animation thing eventually. I just haven't gotten around to it. But 10% off. They're still good, though. They are.
568 times 4 plus 1635 mastery plus 2272 high secondary stat for a total of 6179 secondary stats, while a similar item level ring has 6131 total secondary stats. This is a bit arbitrary, but every ring in the game has the exact same total stat value with another ring if they are of the same item level. Now notice how both the regular ring and the super ring have, let's be honest, the same exact item power, making the new ring kinda shit, since instead of having a regular ring with the stats you want, you get to build a bear your own ring with worse stats you now have to also grind for, getting the same end result.
Damn.
Of course, 2 things to note here. One is that the mastery effect doesn't apply, either because it's not meant to or it's a bug. Let's assume it is a bug, because otherwise it would really suck for whoever thought these numbers would be fine. So my other gems are supposed to be boosted by my mastery, and I assume they would be by my raw mastery rating and not the actual total percentage, since each spec converts mastery rating into mastery percentage differently, making the value of this damage skyrocket like mad for other classes. So if the value of the other gems would be boosted by my mastery, this becomes an easy best in slot item from the sheer value of raw stats, assuming that the benefit is not, oh, I don't know, 200 extra stats, which would be nothing considering my mage really only wants haste mastery or haste versatility, with crit being close to pointless. Now we have a fat stat stick as a ring that we are right now hoping it would be a fat stat stick, because it isn't at this point. Right now, this is just an average ring with worst stat distribution, since there are almost no specs that want a healthy balance of all 4 secondary stats, as opposed to just narrowing down on 2 big stats. If we go any
they're gonna have to fix that. They're gonna have to fix it. It's not just item level that makes an item best in slot. I feel like sometimes that slips through the cracks. Like, oh, let's just give it the highest item level, and then it'll become. No, it's not. It's not best in slot. They got to make sure the stats line up properly. Otherwise, everyone's gonna be angrily, equipping it
further and try to make some other different combinations, you would soon realize there aren't that many. If we take my Fire Mage as an example, and I am sure your spec might be the same, for the Thunder slot, I don't really want the stat gem. I don't value all secondary stats the same, and I would have to trade a haste verse ring that's bis for something of lower value. So instead, I have to choose one of the others. My options are Roaring War Queen Citron that has a chance to trigger the Thunder Gems of 4 of my allies when I use spells and abilities. That's a neat thing, but cool. That means I get nothing and just boosting my allies. Not really a mage choice here.
Imagine you're in there, you're boosting your allies, and then you get kicked from a raid for having lower DPS than some other people. Yeah, not exactly what the community likes to see. I don't know about these guys. Always the boosting other people's shit. It's always you just rather not take it. Why the hell you want to help other people over yourself? You're literally setting yourself up for failure. It's like evokers right now. Like you always got to look at it, evokers DPS, and be like, well, they're kind of helping everyone else. Yeah, silly amulet. Yeah, gonna get you kicked for raids, man.
/ support choice. That's cool, but it won't work for me. Next is Storm Sewer, which gives an absorb shield for 320,000 damage on my over 6 million HP and damage attackers back. This is clearly a tank gem, and if this doesn't proc like all the time, the absorb will be close to useless, since tanks are already rocking 10 million HP. What are they going to do with a 300k absorb shield? So I am left with Thunderlord's Crackling Citron that zaps enemies for 213k nature damage, and the way this is set up is to actually proc by quite a bit. This would actually give me trinket level damage procs, which in a vacuum is a good thing, but once again it's not free damage, since I get this instead of haste verse that would scale my own damage instead. But moving forward, it turns out I really only have one gem to get here, making all the rest pointless. The C slot is the same. Mastery was good for Sun Fury Fire Mage, but for Frostfire you want versatility instead, so no to the Mastery one. Definitely no to the Heal Your Allies one. Make the healer work for it, am I right?
The hell, get that out of here.
So I am left with Undersea Overseer Citron that does frost damage bouncing between 2 enemies. Similarly, for the wind, I will likely take Squall Sailor Citron that does damage to 5 enemies, since the legendary Skipper Citron that is supposed to proc a random other gem at 150% effectiveness does not currently work. First of all...
Oh, that's great. That's great. So it doesn't work. Yeah, all these ones... this isn't one of them, but all the ones that help your allies, does anybody ever use those? Maybe like a race to world first, like guild or something, or like really high key chasers that only run with specific groups. But anyone who's doing anything puggable, or even in like a more casual guild, they're not gonna help anybody. They're not gonna choose to help other people with a stat stick over themselves. That's crazy talk. I wonder if we could see like a survey of how many people pick the ones that actually help other people. We're not like, that's not the WoW community. We're degenerates. You gotta help yourself.
Notice how each gem is either AoE or single target, and completely terrible at what it is not. The concept of swapping gems in and out is cool, but for me there is nothing to swap in or out to. Stats is just a ring I already have, and the procs are just another trinket I already have. The only real interesting gems are the ones that proc other gems, and this has to be some quirky crazy scaling where we are in a party and all of our gems start singing a fucking orchestra of damage procs left and right, or at the end of the day this ring ends up being super terrible.
Man, he's critting a lot.
In the end, this can change, of course, if they buff them. The devs already changed 2 of the gems since announcing this, from also having secondary stats to a totally different effect. One such example is the proc other gems at 150% effectiveness. Another is the Sea Bed Leviathan Citron that was also a secondary stat gem, to now giving over 8k stamina and making attackers take tiny little frost damage. This gem is actually the best example of how boring this ring is. Clearly, this is meant for tanks or PvP.
Yeah.
The 8k stamina barely gives you 200k HP, which for me as a mage is a tiny little bit of survivability. While for a tank,
Alex, thank you for the 100 bits. Yeah, this is all the tanking ones that I've seen so far. There's nothing exciting about them. They're adding a little bit, maybe that bubble proc one if it procs enough, but otherwise, like with 300k absorb, what is that?
it's likely
Need some
nothing
bigger
when they get
numbers.
meleeed from north of 1 million damage to 5 million HP points. These are too safe. The stats and procs are too safe. This ring should be an obvious bis, but it is not.
No,
You
it's
cannot
not.
tell how good having tiny little baby DPS procs being better than raw stats that scale into your spec is. You need a sim, you need to watch guides, or assume gems have to be bugged for how little they are actually doing. No, this is PTR and it's not really supposed to be perfect. If anything, this video might be to attract attention to the issues because 1107 ring is not it, chief. The Dragonflight one had double the number of gems to play with and so many more combinations possible. And actually,
Yeah, but even the Dragonflight one, I do remember, especially for a couple classes, including Blood Decays, it was not best in slot when it first came out. It did take a couple rounds of hot fixes to actually get that thing up to where it needed to be. So I'm sure the same is gonna be true for this.
interesting effects. None of those were secondary stat gems. And this is a marker of how boring the gearing system is in WoW, where secondary stats become the thing people want the most. We don't have to have double the number of gems though. Imagine if there were actually 24 gems you could play with and almost all valuable. Imagine them actually being strong and you making combinations based on the dungeon you are in, the world event you want to clear, the raid you want to smash, and the system will let you do it since swapping gems in and out does not actually destroy them, making these an ideal mini talent tree with 3 options out of 12.
But I don't know, call me lazy. I don't like to do that. I don't like to swap shit out, when I'm doing one thing over another thing. I literally hold the same spec when I'm doing Mythic Plus or Raid. And I know even that's kind of blasphemy, but I don't want to change it. I just run that shit. I just run it. I'm not changing it. I'm going to be a lazy fuck. I'm not going to go swap out gems on my ring because I want to kill a world boss. I'm just going to go kill it. So, I mean, as much as maybe some people love this kind of stuff, I'm not one of them. I prefer just to run my spec the same way and just clear all the content I want to clear, know my rotation, and just get it done. I try the lowest common denominator, basically. Cough, cough, same. Yeah, that's just how I am. I less work. I don't want to do work before I go do the stuff I want to do.
But it's actually 3 options out of at best 5, making over 50% of the system pointless to you. And I bet you anything tanks will also want stats and damage procs and not the absorbs and stamina ones. The whole system in the end is just as Marcellian said in our wrap up a few weeks ago, 99% copy pasta with fewer options and more boring effects. This is a bit disappointing from what we were expecting. The saving grace for the patch.
Look, 11.0.7 just feels that way, though. Like even the island itself, I think they're saying it was an island expedition island from BFA. Like it's been in the game. The mount, remember that Phoenix mount? That's going to be one of the things we can get. I don't know. It's like that Blue Boy Phoenix. That was a mount that was, I think, in the game since WoD. Like everything about this patch, including the Onyx Amulet, or I'm calling it the Onyx Amulet because that's literally what it is, a copy of that. Everything about this patch is just recycled. It's recycled content, which is okay, because you know what that tells me? Maybe I'm just being a positive Andy. Maybe 11.1 has a shit ton of content in it. Maybe they decided, like, hey, let's get this 0.7 patch out, give them something to do for, like, 2 months, and then we're dropping this new fucking season. All this new, they're reworking Mythic Plus. They're going to give us a totally new zone, the new driving stuff that's coming, the new raid. Maybe 11.1 is just jam-packed. It's like a ton of content, and they just said, let's just focus on that, and we'll get this 0.7 patch out here real quick. I'm hoping. Or they just fucking botched it. They got lazy on us. I don't know.
Would be the zone and actually the catch-up gear for your alts, which in the end is not a saving grace for your main if you just play one character or you want to constantly play and progress your own character. Doing all the content in the first day got me about 2.4k of the Flame Blessed Iron.
Oh, Scott, thank you for the raid, coming in with a 6 and to bringing 6 more into our Scourge. Thank you. If they're reusing assets that they haven't used before, I don't care. I'm fine with it. Yeah, me too. I'm fine with it. I'm just saying it shows like a little bit, less work went into this patch maybe than previous patches, and I'm okay with that as long as that time that they saved by reusing some stuff is being used somewhere else, like maybe 11.1. Maybe 11.1 is going to be great. Maybe 11.2 is what they're working on. I don't know. I just want them to be doing something else if this is going to be more of a reuse patch.
And one piece of gear costs 140 to
I hope
175
it's.
or 350.
I guess what I'm saying is I hope it's not just like this cost-cutting, money-saving tactic. Yeah, because it could also be that, and I'm hoping that's not what it is.
For a two-hander of that currency. That means you can actually gear an alt with all veteran gear in one day, maybe two. That is actually pretty good catch-up, letting you skip all of those campaign rewards, green crafted gear, or world quests. Even reputation events that also give you veteran gear. And you get to choose what you want from a gear vendor, and you can essentially farm the resource with your main and send your gear to your alt. It's like Christmas for alt gearing. Why can't we just have this vendor in the game all the time? There is a very slight chance the currency is inflated on the PTR for the sake of testing, but I would be really surprised if it is, since there is not much testing into buying gear for alts. The activities in the zone are cool. You get to encounter Vrykul, Nagas, and pirates, which feel more warcrafty than what we have received in Dragonflight for sure, but they would probably get stale after a couple of days, since it's pretty much most of the same thing and the zone is fairly small.
Yeah, I've found by day 3. When there's a tiny new zone, I would say by day 3 of logging in, I'm like, yeah, it's not that exciting anymore. I don't, especially when it's a tiny zone. Like I've had a lot of that where, oh, the first day I'm excited to go see it. Second day, cool, we're still doing this content. Third day, I'm like, I'm ready. I'm ready for the next thing. Thank you. That's how it feels. It's a 3-day
But
island.
at least it's soloable, and WoW is better now solo, or so we think and say in this video right here. If you're not convinced, then click it and see if you are right.
Yeah, look, I mean, he didn't say anything wrong. Not bad. The patch is what it is. The ring is for sure going to have to get fixed in some way, buffed in some way. If they want to make it a best in slot, it needs to be a best in slot. It can't just be some stats are lacking compared to another ring that you could pick up from Raid. And they're going to make everybody use it. So it's going to be a best in slot. They're going to buff it if they need to. The patch is a filler patch, guys. At the end of the day, we'll call it what it is. And all in all, if it goes more time into 11.1 and maybe 11.2, then I'm okay with that.